Good morning. Can those who can in their wherever you are, if you can stand with me as we read from a portion of scripture, Romans chapter 13, verses 1 to 7. Romans chapter 13, verses 1 to 7. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God, the powers that are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisted the power resists the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is a minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Verse 5. Wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. For this cause pay ye tribute also, for they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Verse 7. Render therefore to all their dues. Tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. May the Lord bless the reading of the scriptures. Let's all be seated. Last time we introduced ourselves to this new section, which we said in Paul's systematic theology, he covers the topic of government in the world. We studied how this topic is completely tied to the doctrine of God's sovereignty itself. Sadly, and perhaps ironically, as we study these passages of a Christian's attitude towards the government, we are faced with the real practical outworking of a man's belief in this section in the nation of America right now. People have gone on the streets to protest against the government, charging the police with racism after the custodial death of the Afro-American citizen by the name of George Floyd. Now, the charge of racism is serious enough. Racism itself is sin. But the question in front of us in this passage will be, as a Christian, do we again have to remind the world and fellow Christians that not submitting to the government and creating situations of looting and arson by themselves is a sinful activity? So a question again would be this: what should be our attitude at a time like this and at other times when situations like these arise? Paul started by telling us that we have to be subject to all powers higher to us. That did not mean we only have to submit to the highest powers, but to all higher powers. Now, this is important to what we might study later today, to a doctrine of lesser magistrates. So not only the highest power, but even the powers higher to you are important, the way God runs the economy on the earth by his power. Now, last time we said we'll study these 7 verses into 3 portions. Now, as always, the portions might not be very strictly followed. There would be some way it leaks into or bleeds into the other, but a general idea would be good enough for us to understand. Verses 1 and 2 in this section, we'll see the spiritual reasons why we need a government and why we need to submit to the government. Problems to the idea of submission to the government, and also we study the problem of a concept called as natural rights will be seen. Verses 3 to 5, we'll study the role of the government and the concept of the limited government. And verses 6 to 7, we'll again see our responses to the government. If we have really learned the truth, if we have really submitted to the truth, how do we put this into practice? Now, there's again an important thing that I want you to remember. We did this last time. Submission does not mean obedience. We did this last time. I want you to understand this. Submission can include obedience, would many times have obedience, but submission is not equal to obedience for a very simple reason. The Bible constantly asks us to submit to the authorities, constantly asks us to submit to each other. The wife is asked to submit to the husband. Now, all these are true. Now, the problem that we need to understand here is that when submission is important, we also need to understand that the person needs to understand when he should not obey the government. We have clear examples in front of us. For example, we read in the book of Acts that what should we do? Should we choose between you and God? When it comes to obeying God, obeying man, we rather obey God rather than man. There would be instances where people would actually go against the law of the land in favor of God. As far as the Old Testament, if you remember the story of Rahab, Rahab went against her own government to support the people of God. In the New Testament, there are so many instances. If you remember Acts 9:25, when Paul says disciples took him by the night when the Pharisees of the state were waiting for him, and they let him down the wall in a basket against the rule of the Pharisees. Now, practically, I understand this will throw open a whole lot of questions like, is rebellion allowed? Will an armed rebellion be right? And I want you to understand this. Whenever you think about the Reformation and the American Revolution, there was a different doctrine also in place. We talk about that, the doctrine of lesser magistrates. God willing, we might do that as a separate study, and we see the merits as well as the difficulties in that. But let's focus to the text at hand. Paul tells us that when you become a Christian, this is what you do. And he gave us a complete practical outworking of every way I see my believers in the church, my brethren in the church, people outside, and even enemies. Now he talks about people in the government. Now, you need to remember, the moment you become a Christian, a very important change happens to the way you deal with relationships. It's important, as many times Christians think that since they have become Christians, they do not owe anything to anyone. They do not have any more worldly ties. They do not have anything to do with the government, or sometimes even relatives, or even to spouses, to your jobs, or to your bosses. Everything has changed. We spoke about this last time. This was one of the major errors of this group called as Anabaptists, who thought that since they are Christians, they're not supposed to anymore obey the government. But here's important. This is not a Christian thought. Let me explain why. See, while it's true that when you become a Christian, there is a new life in you, you have changed, and in a sense, you are no longer one among the world. But here's something more important. You are still in the world. And while you have changed, around you, you should remember everything else is still the same. If your spouse is not a Christian, she has not changed, your children have not changed, your boss has not changed, your government has not changed, your relations have not changed. But you have changed and they have not. So you cannot expect them to change and do the right thing. It is you who would have the burden of doing the right thing and not them. They are still slaves to sin and this evil world. And they are still of the world, and you belong to the Lord. And this will be seen in your attitude to each of the relationships on this earth. So how does this new man work with the government. Now, if you remember last time, we understood Paul giving us a clear injunction, and he says, let all souls submit to the government. Now, we said this last time. This is not an injunction, this is not a command only for Christians. This is a command Paul gives to all humans on the earth. Let all souls be subject to the government, to the power. Now, here's a big problem. One can ask, by what right Paul can ask the unbelievers to listen to his command? They are unbelievers, and Paul has no right to tell them how to live their lives. In fact, we keep hearing this from Christian people, that please keep your church and the state separate. And when they say that, they wrongly imply that since the outsiders are there, we cannot put Christian standards on outsiders. The implications, the unbelievers, beg your pardon, can live the way they want to. And should not be asked by Christians to obey them. We see this when we are unable to talk to a culture regarding issues like homosexuality, abortion, because even Christians say these are Christian principles and not necessarily common principles for everyone. And that's the reason, even when our children learn things in school which are wrong, we land up telling to us and to each other, the school is not Christian. So even if the school teaches something wrong, how do we go and correct them? They are not Christians. Beloved, let's understand this one simple thing. And I want you to remember this. A Christian cannot have an unchristian view about anything. A Christian cannot have an unchristian view about anything. Every response of a Christian in all matters, he brings all his thoughts, all his ideas subject to Christ. No matter what subject you're working on, the Christian stand will be clear. If that does not happen, the opposite will happen. I'll tell you what I mean. Instead of Christianity being seen in the secular world, correcting it, showing it the standard of God, we'll see the opposite. The secular world will be seen in Christianity, will be seen in the Christian church, will be seen in the Christian doctrine and our practices. And you'll see this in every field and in every line of work. And the church is not separated from this. Last week, I was having a very interesting conversation with Rocky. Rocky was worried about his friend in the States who was about to get married. And he was a part of the Presbyterian church there. And his friend had gone for a pre-marriage counseling session. And it seemed that the church used a system which helped in identifying problem of each person so that they would be much more suitable for marriage. All you had to do was to fill a questionnaire and feed it into the system. Then the system will tell you your weaknesses and which are the areas you have to work on. Now, this was a very intense conversation. And Rocky asked me, do you think those kind of things are allowed in the church? Now, almost as if Rocky wanted to ask me, can you or do you think our church can have that? Now, every inch inside me wanted to scream out to Rocky that, Rocky, this is not a modern system. I do not have that system in our church, but I have had that system in my house for the last 13 years. The best part of that system is I don't even have to fill a memo to do that. I just have to be myself, uncaring, selfish, unchristlike, and all the corrections I need, she tells me for the last 13 years at one go. If we look at Christian problems and Christian solutions and we think man can give us our solutions, it'll always land up like this. We'll be depending on what people make for us instead of we telling the people what they need. A Christian has a duty to tell the world that it has to submit to the word of God. The identification of the problem, the solution to the problem would both have to be Christian. The problem in the world today is not that they cannot see the problem, but even when they see the lack of moral standard, they do not know the real reason. That the real reason is the enmity against God. They are not submitting to God. So when Paul asks them to submit to them, it's not Paul's individual command, but rather it's a command of God. We see this in the 10th commandment itself. When you read the Heidelberg Catechism, you notice this, that from the 10th command, or from the 5th commandment, we get the commandment to obey all authorities. So if a Christian is not to command them in things pertaining to the earthly government, if a Christian has to keep quiet when it comes to matters of this world and this government, then tell me how in the world can he command them to repent and believe on the Son of God, which is also a command of the Christians living God. Beloved, we should never think that the unbeliever on the street cannot understand Christian principles, and he need not follow Christian principles, so we need not even tell him this. This is the reason our society has come to the point where it has, where we think certain principles are only meant for our community and not meant for them. The looting and the arson in America is sadly just because of that, because the Christian principle has been taken away. Paul tells us, let every soul be subject unto higher powers. For there is no power but of God, and the powers that be are ordained of God. There is no power but of God. Now, though the text itself is clear, we should not forget that Paul has finished a long section on the end times for the Jews. So the fear is they might land up thinking that all powers are from God and every power is from God, but the powers today are all evil. Only the power that is going to come later is the right power. So today, since these powers are evil, I do not need to follow them. But here's how Paul starts, and that's the brilliant logical mind of Paul. He starts with the negative and then he gives the positive. Not only it's true that there is no power but of God, but any power which is there today is ordained of God. I'll repeat this for you. Any power which is there today is ordained of God. Now, this is almost criminal if you speak about this in the open, isn't it? Can you see the implications of what Paul is saying? Every power which is there has been ordained by God. No matter how much you try to dull the edge of this statement, it will only come back to cut you. Let us try some actual examples. Paul says that every power is ordained by God. Do you remember this man by the name of Adolf Hitler, the ruler of Germany? He came to power with the help of a democratic election, but then he removed the federal government. He became the main reason for the World War. He would spearhead the mass murder, the great Holocaust of more than 6 million Jews. Can you repeat with Paul again? Every power is ordained by God in light of Hitler and his Germany. In the light of this murderous government of the Nazis, will you be comfortable saying this government was ordained by God? The list can go on and on, brothers. What about Stalin? He has killed perhaps even more people than Hitler. The Stalinist state was so fearsome that even the worst Nazi will be scared to be finding himself in a gulag of the Soviets. Are you telling me that Paul tells me that all these powers get their actual power from God? Not only them. Not only the Nazis, not only the Stalinists, not only the Soviets, but if there was any power in the world, till the time the Son comes back to establish his own kingdom with the new heaven, every power is a power from God. Beloved, if man is independent of God, and if man's government is independent of God, then the God we serve will not remain very much a God, will he? Because then we would be looking up to these powers to save us. If Stalin or Hitler is the one who decides how we will deal with the church, if he can finish the church, or people be treated as his own, how we will kill, how we will feed, can you really pray to God for protection? Every human government, every time, has been ordained by God. Let's look at the Bible for this. It's good to go back to the beginning. As the song goes, let's start from the beginning. It's a very good place to start. After being removed from the Garden of Eden, and when Cain sinned by killing his brother, and Cain was a fugitive, do you remember? He ran. Who made a rule that Cain would not be hunted down or killed? It was God. Genesis 4:15 reads like this, and the Lord said unto Cain, therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. A few chapters later, you see the great flood. Genesis chapter 9, 5 and 6. And it says, and surely your blood of your lives will I require at the hand of every beast will I require it, and the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whosoever sheddeth man's blood, by man's blood by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. This is the point from which we understand about capital punishment. Though we know, we already saw hints about that in the episode of Cain. We talk about this, God willing, in the coming Sundays, that by what law, when a man takes someone's life, do we declare that his life has to be taken? Turn again to 2 Samuel 12:7. 2 Samuel 12:7. And Nathan said to David, thou art the man. Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel. I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul. I gave thee the master's house, the master's wives into thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would have moreover had given unto thee such and such things. David, the king of Israel, became the king of Israel because God gave Israel and Judah into his hands. Now, isn't it obvious to us? That was Israel. That was God's country. God would decide who would be the king. But not so probably for the other countries around them. Right? Wrong. Turn to Jeremiah 27. Jeremiah 27, verses 5 to 7. I have made the earth, the man, and the beast that are upon the ground by my great power and by my outstretched arm, and I given it unto whom it seemed meet unto me. And now have I given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. God says he has given all these lands to Nebuchadnezzar. But look at the description. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and the beasts of the field have I given him also to serve him. And all nations shall serve him, and his son, and his son's son, until the very time of his land come. And then many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of him. God made Nebuchadnezzar who he was to conquer lands. And God calls Nebuchadnezzar his servant. You remember who this Nebuchadnezzar is? This king who took the people of Israel captive. The same king who made a statue of himself to be worshipped. The same king who said, if anyone does not worship that statue, he will be thrown to hungry lions or burnt alive. But even when he said that, there was someone who was submitting to every rule made by Nebuchadnezzar, but not this. Remember? Submission and obedience against the will of God does not always go together. Every country in the world, every nation in the world, God controls, God keeps people there. Turn to Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2, verses 20 and 21. Daniel chapter 2, verse 20 and 21. And Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. Now pay attention to verse 21. And he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He removes kings and he sets up kings. Beloved, the reason to submit to powers and authority is that God has ordained it. Now, we'll study this, probably God willing, but no political philosophy can ever give you a reason why you need a government, nor why should people be subject to a government. We'll discuss about this again, I assure you, later. But sufficient to say is this, that if someone tells you, why should I listen to the government? And they tell you, if you don't listen to the government will punish you, really does not cut the ice. I'll explain this. If someone asks you, why should I submit to the government in the first place? Answer, it has power. Can I reply, what if I take over that power and I become that power? Then will everyone have to submit to me? That will again get someone else getting more power and fighting me. And then there would be no submission. There'll be complete anarchy. This can go on and on if your only reason to submit to government is the fear that the government will punish you. Punishment is not the reason a Christian is supposed to submit to the government. It is God who is the reason a Christian is supposed to submit to the government. If you are going to submit to a government just because it has power, if you consider the logic, you can just wait till the next brute comes in place. You might say, I'm not going to bow down in front of this government. I'll wait till the next person who's much more stronger takes over his place. And by that logic, rebellion will not be illegal. In fact, more advisable. So please remember this. Submission to the government is not because of the fear of judgment. Submission of the government is because it is ordained by God. Why? Because if you are going against what God ordains, anyone who rebels against it, rebels against the God who has ordained it. Romans 13 verse 2 tells us this. Whosoever therefore resisted the power, resisted the ordinance of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. Whosoever resisted. The Greek word here is has a meaning of to align yourself, to range oneself against something. So here is someone actively aligning himself against that power. Now, you might think that when I go against the power, I'm indirectly going against God. No, that is true. When you stand against the power, you're indirectly standing against God. But Paul is making it even more serious. He's not saying indirectly. He's saying directly you're standing against God. I'll explain to you how. Look at how Paul is saying. Whoever therefore resisted the power resists the ordinance of God. He just does not resist the power and God which is behind the power. He's resisting a law made by God. And that's the reason fighting against the government or rebelling against the government at that time or not submitting to the government is non submission to the rule of God, and that is sin. Now, I want you to understand this. And the implication of this is extremely big. In fact, it's so big that I can take a complete sermon as a side note on this point. I don't want to drift away from the main point, but it'll be criminal for me not to make you notice this. When we deny actions required by God, I'm repeating this again. When we deny actions required by God, whatever be the reason behind it, you're disobeying God's law, who has demanded those actions. You're disobeying God's law, who has demanded those actions. I'll explain this. Your wife is unloving. She doesn't care for you. Since she doesn't care for you, you don't love her anymore. Now, whom are you against? Are you against your wife? No. You're against God and God's law, God's ordinance that demands you to love your wife. Wives, your husband is a drunkard, not the role model that he has to be. So since he's a drunkard, he might be a wife beater. He is no good but a monster. So I don't have to submit to him. Whom are you against? Not your husband. You're against God and the rule that God has given. The same logic is what Paul is trying to apply to the government, that when you do not submit to the government, you actively resist God. You are standing in line to fight against God because it's God who has ordained this law. If you're against it, you're fighting God's law. So that's the first reason a Christian submits to a government. Why does he submit to the government? Because that government has been ordained by God. Reason number two, Romans 13, 2b. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. And they that resist the government shall receive to themselves damnation. The second reason why we have to submit to the government is those who resist it, those who rebel against it, will receive to themselves damnation. Now, on the very outset, the word damnation is the same word used even in the book of Revelation, chapter 20, which we did a couple of days back, about the judgment seat of Christ. But in this context, I want you to understand it cannot mean if someone does not submit to the government, he will be damned, as in he will lose his salvation. No one loses their salvation. In fact, the context makes it very clear. The word judgment here can refer either to punishment or even a declaration of punishment. Many times, the declaration of judgment is as good as the punishment itself. Also, we should be very clear that if we think submission to the government will free him from judgment, it almost looks as if it's, or rather, it makes it to be salvation by works. It is not. What Paul is trying to tell you is this: if you go against the government, you will be punished. Now, a very good question to ask is, who will punish me? Will God punish me, or will the state punish me? Now, beloved, it's very easy to answer that problem, right? Because we've already understood that every state is in the hand of God. So the punishment will be from God and be from the state. Even if it's from the state for rebellion, we need to understand it is God who works all things for his glory. The judgment may be the punishment inflicted by the authorities, or it can be a divine judgment. It can be probably both. But the punishment carried itself is the way every divine judgment will work. God will judge him finally on that great day. But temporarily, the state itself will become an instrument in the hand of God to judge that person. So the second reason to submit to the government is reason number one, that it's ordained by God. Reason number two, if you do not do it, you will be judged. And reason number three, Romans 13, verse 3. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil, will then not be afraid of the power. Brothers, if you really believe that every state is in the hand of God, every power is in the hand of God, will you really fear the government? Or will you with confidence stand in front of it? The third reason to be submitting to a government is because you believe in God and you are someone who knows you will do good because of God, and so you will not be fearful of God. The person who's fearful will not submit. In fact, it almost looks like an evidence of believing that God is the one who's ruling the universe, an evidence that God is the one behind every power. When you do good, the powers will reward you, which we again see the Lord is going to use some state or some government to punish, and the Lord might use some governments to even reward. Now we go into the detail of this probably in the coming Sunday when we discuss what is the scope of the government itself. What should the government be doing? How much should the government have power? Should we understand have a limited government or an unlimited government? But I want you to still understand when Paul is talking about it this time, the government in front of him is a unlimited, all powerful, tyrannical government, which not only tells you how to live, it will kill you the moment it decides to. When we discuss the other matters, it's more in the realm of what is the kind of government we would want as Christians. And this is nothing new or nothing new for us to discuss. Even Israel discussed the same thing, that they wanted a king. And God told them what their king should be, what a king's rule should be. And probably it will be good for us to go back one day and study that. So is there really no place for us to fight for our rights because of what we've learned earlier? What we learned earlier about a Christian submitting to the government, so shouldn't a Christian ask for his rights? Now, this is an important question, and many people trip here. And I will take a little bit more time only to explain this. If some of you may not understand this clearly, trust me, it is not important. For people who are struggling with the question of rights, you would have to listen to this carefully. The question always arises, does a man have natural rights? This is more of a philosophical problem. Does a man have a natural right to do things? Does a man have a natural right to live? For example, if you remember, the American Constitution and says every person has an inalienable right of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. An inalienable right, a right that cannot be taken away from him, of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So many Christians have an argument like this. God has revealed himself to us in his creation. Now, we know God and many things he wants us to do from nature itself. In fact, doesn't the book of Romans tell us that his invisible attributes are very clearly seen here? So man, who's created in the image of God, as God is free, man has a natural right of freedom. And when we see in nature, any person taking away man's natural rights, they have a right to fight against that power. And this natural right has been given by God Himself to us. And we can see that in nature. So every time in nature you see injustice, in the world you see injustice, and you see people's natural right taken away, a Christian has a right to ask for his natural right. They usually point to the war between the colonies and England, which gave the world the free country of America. They justify the idea that people have a right to fight against tyranny. Now, there are a few other terms that you use pretty often in their discussion. There are some terms like the non-aggression axiom, which sometimes it's marked simply as NAP, a non-aggression pact, which means that any kind of attack on anyone's property or freedom is wrong unless you want to fight to protect it. You see how it goes? Any kind of attack on anyone's property or freedom is wrong unless you want to fight to protect it. And they say this is obvious from nature. They'll tell you, you'll find these ideas in America quite a lot. I mean, the libertarian view of government uses the same principle that we understand from nature and God. And this is the only way to save America. Now, the principle of freedom is important, but the principle of freedom cannot be found from nature. It is impossible for a person to look at nature, look at the universe, and come to a conclusion and make a universal truth. No matter how many people you see being tyrannized, being tortured, and looted, you cannot come to the conclusion that tyranny is wrong. That's the whole failure of empirical observation. This is the whole failure how science cannot ever give you the truth. Science can never give you any universal truth, because if you're going to see incidences from nature and then come out to say this is how it ought to be, you can never understand that. Someone looks at the universe and tells me that there is suffering. Suffering is not an observation. Suffering is a moral idea that is connected to that episode. So when someone tells you that we have a fundamental right against tyranny, you can always ask, how did you get that knowledge? By looking at nature? How can you? Someone can come to the opposite conclusion by looking at nature. You as a man, when you see tyranny, and as a Christian, you will feel bad for them. Someone might actually take joy out of them. And you might come to the conclusion that a strong man has a right to beat up someone else. Beloved, what is, at the end of the day, the theory of evolution? The strong has the right to survive because he can eat up the weak. And so if someone comes, if we have natural rights, there is no natural right. In fact, every right that you have is a right that God has given to you. It's imputed to you. And when you do not do what is right, thus those rights will be taken away from you. The Protestant, the Reformed idea of imputation of the righteousness of Christ applies exactly in the doctrine of freedom. You cannot look at nature and come to universal truths. Why? Because after Adam's sin, nature is no longer what it was. And also, please understand, you also are not what you are as Adam was. You are in sin. And because you are in sin, do not expect for you to read anything clearly, even if it is given right in front of you. In fact, even when the words of scripture is given to a natural man, he cannot understand it unless the Spirit of God helps him. But again, people come to you and tell you, no, brother, doesn't the Bible say in Romans 2:15 that the law of God is written in man's heart? And so this law of God shows him the law of God is written in man's heart. But if you clearly understand Romans 1 and Romans 2, the point is to leave him without excuse. That when he stands in front of God, he cannot say he did not know this. This is not for us to make rules for our government. The only way to get laws is a law made by God. And this God tells us what you should do when there's a government in front of you. He made this world, he ordains government, and for any man to think that he can simply go against the government and not think about the God who's behind it is a mark of rebellion. Brothers, fundamental rights is a contradictory statement. And if you think you can get rights from nature, it's an idol worship of nature itself. Any concept of morality, any concept of rights has to come from the Bible itself. Let me ask you this. What we studied today, has it made your heart joyous? Or has it made your heart sad and weak? That do I submit to this government? In fact, as I speak, in our own country, we are going through an extremely bad time, aren't we? We have seen rules and regulation come into place, even more so, that might want the country to run only in one direction. But do we lose hope? Or do we understand that even behind the worst fascist which would be found, there is my God in heaven who controls everything? They cannot harm me because I am submitting to my God. And even if they do, it is my God's decree to do what he wants with my life. Instead of losing my patience and my sleep over what the government is doing, I go to my God and see what he does for me. Beloved, the governments can be tough. Work that they do can really be tough because we have been put into these ideas that you have got certain rights that the government is taking away. No, whether that government is taking away or no is a matter for a different discussion. But your only hope is not a better government. Your only hope is a God in heaven. Your only joy through all the difficulties that you might face is that God in heaven. And your hope is that this God will let you be worshiping him in all of this mess around you, in that same joy. So that when the government asks you to submit, you submit. When they ask you to disobey God's law, you stand up against it. Has this passage left you with that beauty of happiness? That even if I was in Nazi Germany or Stalin's Russia or Mao's China, what would I do? What would I be? Beloved, some of us have the luxury of sitting in our houses and even discussing matters like this. Have you ever thought of people in China, African countries like Nigeria, Yemen? What do you think they would be thinking at this time? Would they be joy to know that what is happening to them is because the God has ordained every action? And still preaching that God's word, they'll be ready to submit to the government, even though the government tells them to be in jails for years together. What you learn in the practical section, brethren, is that not only to fill up your mind with things, but when the rubber is actually put to the road, when you actually test it, what comes out of you? I think America has been tested, and they came out woefully inadequate in how they reacted. Whether the sin of that person was high is for God to judge and the government, but they could not go up in arms and arson. We ask that God would judge the evildoers in all the circumstances, right from the killing of the man to every looting that was done. God asks you to submit to the government, but not sin against him. Now, all this idea of government is really important. But if someone here has his own heart in rebellion against God, none of this will make any sense to you. You will not only be judged here, but you will be waiting for the bigger judgment to come, which is eternal. You are guilty not only in front of this government, but even in front of the government of God. So if any of this joy that you don't understand, it's because you're not understanding what God is, what his son has done on the cross for his church. I would ask you to reconsider your life, your future in the light of the gospel of Christ. Let every soul be subject to the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisted the power resists the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. Let's look to the Lord in prayer. Master, the chaos outside is deafening. Not because there are more people or less people on the street, but this chaos because people do not even know what makes their life move, what makes the wheel of anything in this world move. The governments, the authorities, their jobs, their bosses, who moves all of them. But Lord, as Christians, help us that we are not drawn or driven by this chaos. We see you in everything. We find you in everything. In everything that we write and we think, we bring every thought subject to you. Firstly ours, then the world's. Help us, Master, that whatever we write, whatever we breathe, whatever we think would be Christian. Not even for a single second, Master. Give us this privilege of thinking that the problems of this world are secular. It's always spiritual. My problems are always spiritual. And the answer to all my problems is a God who's spirit, the God who's truth. Help me, Lord, that in this world of confusion and chaos, we as your church can challenge them and show your son's gospel. Help us, Lord, that in everything that we learn, you make us humble and question the world at its every point of choice, which it stands itself against you. Sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, sometimes in open rebellion. We are living in this world, Master. And since we are living in this world, Master, the problems of this world would always come to bite back to us. Help us, Lord, to stand and show them how we live our lives by. Not secular principles, but by every word that has been ordained by you, given by you. Every ordinance that you have given to us to live by, to teach to our children, to write on the doorposts of our houses, on our foreheads, that nothing in this world can escape being subject to these words of God. Make us people, Lord, worthy, who work hard to see your truth and how it applies to everything in our lives. Pray for people who are struggling. Pray for this country and the government, that even in their shots of blindness, you will keep your church. Pray for the people in America, the churches who are struggling and fighting for the truth. People who are blinded, families who are struggling through all of this. Pray for them, Lord, that you help them. And let churches be built around to help people with your truth. Thank you for all your words, Master. In your son's name we offer this prayer. Amen.